So a couple things to make note of, first of which you can probably tell that my voice is rather shot. I am losing my voice, so there's not much I can do about that. Do forgive me for my voice kind of sounding like shit. Secondly, you might hear thunder in the background, not much I can do about that. So this is just a great day for audio issues, I have to say. But really, if I didn't get up to review this now, I probably wouldn't have a chance to get around to it. So we have to talk about Astra Lost in Space episode 11, which is the second to last episode, which really kind of highlights everything that this series has been building up to, and I quite liked it overall. I mean, we get a lot of confirmation on things that a lot of us have already kind of pieced together, like Ares' name spelled backwards is Hsieh, which obviously was someone that Char's knew in the past, but I do like the idea that the story he did tell everyone was altered, and it made it look a lot different than it actually was, which she was actually the princess of the king that he was genetically made from. So it's kind of interesting how the idea that he was raised on is basically like, you're a clone, you're my body, you will die in the future, and that is okay. And that's something that he truly believed was his route. But his sister, who was also technically his daughter, but depending on perspective, it was viewed one way or the other. It was kind of interesting seeing how the idea of family, the idea of friends, it's something that he sort of had in his life, but also never really had. The idea that his father, or his host, the one who actually created him, he taught him to not believe that he was a person, which is why he was so different than the rest, that this mission was to kill the clones and to kill everyone around him. It made total sense, and you kind of understood why this person was able to do this after so long, but at the same time, it made it feel like a justifiable reason on why he never went through with it up until this point. Because on one hand, he's always secretly wanted this. He wanted to go beyond the castle walls, he wanted to explore the world overall, and most importantly, he wanted to have friends, and he did end up having that, but at the same time, he wanted to push back in the back of his mind. He convinced himself that he was just doing it because he wanted to save Ares. But at the same time, we know that he was holding back until the last possible moment, the last planet before he would push that button, because he did care for them. He just loved this crew overall, but he also understood that his king, his father, his host, this is what he had to do. Like, he truly believed that this was the right outcome, and that everything that he was taught growing up is what he had to do. And it really shows you the difference of how you're raised can really dictate the actions of the present, and just how this entire sequence was just them standing in a cave yelling at each other, crying and being heartbroken because the person that they loved, one of their crew members, was raised in such a toxic way that he's believed that he's not a person and that he has to die for the sins of the person who created him. No, you don't have to die. The person who created us, all of us, they're the ones who have to be killed or punished or something to that nature, not you. That entire sequence was just so gripping. This was definitely the strongest episode of Astra Lost in Space by far. There was emotional punches left and right. The idea that we learned exactly why Ares' mother seemingly was the only one in this group who actually loved the clone that she was keeping, because she was the handmaid to the princess, and that she promised to take care of her, raise her as her own, and that was a connection she never wanted to lose. That's why she never gave up, and it's why during that meeting there was only one person who actually wanted to go look for them, because she truly did love Ares. And I think with this episode, all but just the whole Earth/Astra situation has been covered, because why did the traitor wait for so long? Well, he didn't actually want to kill them, but he convinced himself he had to because of his king-like father clone. I really don't know what I want to call him. Really his father in this situation, because he did create him, even if he is technically the same person. So the idea that he waited for so long and his entire drive was to take the princess, his sister, the one who he always cared for, bring her back home so that she could basically be the next heir, basically make the king happy. That's all that's mattered to him until Kanita, until the rest have opened his eyes and Kanita literally loses his right hand to give him a wake-up call that, no, we're making a crew and you're going to fulfill your promise. You're going to be my right-hand man, which that has to be the best sequence in this entire show. The idea that Kanita literally went above and beyond, and you could maybe argue there was other ways to handle this, but the idea that he stuck his arm into that orb simply to make sure that he would turn it off, because he truly believed that this wasn't a man who wanted to kill them. He just wanted to die himself. He felt like he was a failure, and this was the only option. And the fact that he actually was willing to give up an arm, give up his entire body if he needed to wake up Shars, I think that really highlights the growth and development this entire cast has had, as if the character development mattered, that all these pieces have been laid out since episode 1, and then as we reach the next week's episode, or 3 weeks down the line, or 11 weeks down the line. The way they snap together, it feels like the perfect puzzle, where not a single piece was left out, that we are missing a piece or two by the end, feeling like, oh man, the puzzle wasn't finished. No, the puzzle's been finished, but we just learned that we also have a side puzzle that we get to complete as we enter the 12th and final episode, which I wouldn't be surprised if it's a double-length episode similar to the first episode. But even if it isn't, I think they definitely could wrap up this story with one episode in a pretty satisfying manner. I just think this episode overall, the past few episodes have been that kind of payoff feeling, but I think the most important thing was you had to justify why the traitor waited so long, because he's had multiple opportunities. He tried 2 times and the orb always went away. Why didn't he pull the trigger? And he didn't want to pull the trigger, and when he decided he had to, he realized that waiting till the last planet would be the safest route to get Ares back to the king, but also to keep them alive for as long as possible. He just wanted friends. That's all he wanted, and he tried to convince himself that his father's teachings, that he was a clone, he didn't deserve happiness, he is to blame, and that he has to punish. And it wasn't until Kanita sacrificed his arm that he could really wake up and realize how much of a fool he was being. And you can't even blame Hsieh for what he was doing, because how he was raised as an object, not a person. Where with the rest, even though they had bad family lives, they still thought of themselves as a person. So it was a lot easier for them to say, let's punish the people who created us rather than let us punish, because making clones is illegal, but we're not illegal because we are made. It's the people responsible for creating us. But Hsieh never had that. And I think that's why I love it so much, is that it really does justify all the actions throughout this show, and why throughout this journey the traitor did have moments of genuine happiness, and why he really did want to hold on to it for as long as possible. And I just really enjoyed that overall. I really felt like they handled everything in terms of the main plot elements, the mysteries, the sabotage, the characters exceptionally well. Every single character has had a moment to grow and develop and have really impactful moments throughout this show. We have 1 episode left to reach back home, and it feels like that's all it needs. 1 more episode, get back home, punish the people responsible, get the reunion with the families that can be reunited. But then we have the creation of the crew. Like, even if we don't see it, we know it will happen in the future as long as these characters survive. It's going to be fun to learn exactly just how they altered everyone's memories for Earth and kind of hid that knowledge from the public. There's some smaller details they definitely need to cover, but nothing that major or important, and you know they're going to touch upon it because they've literally covered up every single track that they needed to up to this point. And this episode was absolutely incredible. It was the most emotionally gripping. It was the most interesting. It flew by. It honestly felt like 5 minutes for me. It just felt like it started and then ended. I love seeing the past and how the story that he told was so wrong, but also it did have some layer of truth. It's just he skewed it on the spot to make sure that his kind of royalty wasn't exposed. I just really appreciated what this episode did. It just really feels like, even if like they had to end it here, in a lot of ways you could probably just say, well shit, the crew at least is here, and you kind of believe it could go somewhere in the future. But knowing that they are heading back home, seeing what's going to happen when they arrive, like, this is a major crime, and even if a king did it, the king has to pay. It's going to be so interesting to see what they're going to do and how people are going to be punished, and just, you know, are they all going to get adopted by Ares' mother at this point? Like, what's actually going to happen here? And that's going to be so exciting to see how they're going to wrap it up. I've never been more confident in an anime going into its final episode than probably this. I truly believe there's no way they can't stick the landing at this point. It really does feel like the most perfectly paced series I've seen in so long. Even though I wouldn't write this off as being one of my favorite anime of all time, it's definitely one of my favorite anime of 2019, and one of my favorite paced and structured series, where it really does know how to bring up the questions but also deliver the answers that are both satisfying and make logical sense for the story that they're telling. The voice actors were on point. Have to give major props to both Kanita as well as Hsieh. The emotional rage and heartbreak throughout that entire sequence, you could really tell that this was not only the man to lead this crew, to really charge headfirst, but also make logical decisions that, you know, he's willing to sacrifice himself, but he's going to make sure that his crew don't need to sacrifice themselves. But then just Hsieh's clearly mental breakdown of not knowing which side he really wanted to fall into, the side of friends and humanity or the side of being a clone to die and to give your king what he wants. That scene and just the emotional range that they delivered, and I mean across the board the cast did an exceptional job, but those two in particular, they stole the show and I loved it overall. I just really feel like Astra Lost in Space is a spectacular show that is criminally underrated, and I mean, I'm sure over time the show is going to get more and more popularity. It does very little wrong, so I don't see why it wouldn't. More people will check it out, more people will recommend, and eventually it'll probably become a cult classic. But I definitely think that this is a show that deserves way more praise than it currently gets. And of course, the people who watch it are giving it praise. But I've seen so many people say that they didn't want to watch this because, you know, the first episode kind of give them the impression that it's just a kind of cliche anime with some of the reactions. But within, like, the next episode, those tropes and cliches were already being broken down. This is a show that's absolutely exceptional. I really don't have an issue with it. I honestly don't think it's visually dipped that much. It's really remained cinematic and fluid. The voice acting has been basically top-notch throughout this entire run. And when you really break down the story and character narratives and elements, like, it really did cover all its tracks, and not many series with as many mysteries as this could say that walking out of its 11th episode. It hasn't even ended and it's already covered basically every track that it needed to, and that's something to really compliment and praise. But what did everyone think of this week's episode of Astra Lost in Space? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Your favorite moment? Where do you think the final episode is going to go next week? Think it'll be a double-length episode? Let me know down in the comment section below. If you did enjoy this video, be sure to drop a like and also hit that subscribe button if you happen to be new. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.